as we get started, as Anna said, thank you for inviting us and having us here, and thank you, board, for allowing us to speak today. My name is Dinero Washington. I serve as the CEO for the Transit Authority that represents the Shreveport and Bossier market for public transportation. I've been here a little over 9 years now, and we have a lot of positive things that's going forward. And one of the positive things that we have going forward is public transit and our alternative fuel initiative. Can you hear me now? That'll make it happen. So our alternative fuel initiatives that we have going forward. As we kind of start the presentation, I'm going to kind of give you background on how we got to this point and why we actually switched to alternative fuels. We'll kind of talk about our financing sources today of how we finance these projects, as well as the infrastructure that we've installed and some of the things that we had to do. As we go through the presentation, some of you were at the presentation I did about 2 weeks ago at the round table, but we're going to reiterate some of those things and make sure that we kind of cover. If you have any questions, I like interaction. I don't like to be the one standing here just talking. As we get into some of the numbers, might be surprised by some of the things, but I'll tell you how we feel we're sustaining these options. So in the early 2000s, city administration approached my predecessor, Mr. Gene Eddy, about we needed to look at additional alternative fuels due to we need to reduce the emissions in the Shreveport-Bossier area because we were getting ready to hit a level that we didn't want to hit and be on some mandate. So they looked at converting several fleets in Shreveport. We converted the trash truck fleet as well as we started converting the bus fleet. So their first initiative that they ever did with buses started actually in 2008 with diesel hybrid buses, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. The goal behind how do we pay for this? You know, a lot of people keep saying, well, there's not money out there, things are not happening. But when you go and you replace a fleet of over 50 buses, and then you have a paratransit fleet, which is our smaller fleet where we use cutaway vans of over 20. When you start replacing those vehicles, you need funding sources. So our funding came from the federal government. About 85% of all our funding came from the federal government. We were successful with the state of Louisiana. There was a pot of money that we were able to attain from the U.S. Department of Transportation, well, Louisiana Department of Transportation, and also the city of Shreveport and the city of Bossier made matches for us in order for us to get these grants. So some of the things that we had to do in order to convert over not only dealt with just buses, but we also had to focus on the infrastructure around actually moving these projects forward. We had to go in and build a CNG station. We built a CNG station on our property there on the Jack Wells, our main property at Jack Wells in Shreveport. And this CNG station was 100% federally funded by the Federal Transit Administration. We also, one of the things that, when you're looking at fleets and your conversions, you also have to look at if you have a maintenance facility. Our maintenance facility wasn't in compliance with CNG vehicles, so we had to go in and update our maintenance facility, as well as we had to go in, when we looked at battery electric buses, do also some additional upgrades and put charging stations in to be able to support charging that fleet. This is I just really listed out in case anybody didn't know they were going to share a presentation for later. The biggest thing that I wanted to focus on that in the transit market there were 6 different options. We had diesel, we had compressed natural gas, we had battery electric, we had biofuels, hydrogen, and hybrids that we can look at as options for the Shreveport-Bossier market. So the very first option that I told you that they focused on in 2008 prior to my tenure was switching over to diesel hybrid buses. The diesel hybrid buses performed well for us, but ultimately it did not get us the goal that we were trying to get to. So that's the reason that the city of Shreveport started looking more into the market of moving towards CNG in 2010 and 2011. And actually in 2011 we introduced our first CNG buses in the market in Shreveport. So in Shreveport we operate 3 different type vehicles at this point. We have Proterras, which are battery electric buses built in Greensville, South Carolina. We have New Flyer of America, which is our CNG buses. These buses are built in Winnipeg, and they're also built in Anniston, Alabama. And then we also, on our paratransit side, converted it to two different styles of buses. We have Ford Gavelle vans, as well as we have Arbach buses, which are all CNG vans as well on our paratransit side. So there are alternatives for additional vehicles and smaller capacities to be able to support CNG as well.
On the CNG side, you have, they're capable of both views, or they dedicate to CNG only?
They're dedicated CNG only. And one of the things that we learned, especially on our, it's been quite a few learning curves. But as we learned to move forward with this fleet, on our paratransit side, we first started out with 30 GGEs. And that did not get us the capacity that we needed to operate. So one of the things, if you're ever looking to do a smaller bus or vehicle, we found that 40 GGEs gets us about a little over 300, right at 400 miles that we can operate. It runs just as well as a normal vehicle would operate in that capacity. Yes, sir.
Is that problem with sizing the tanks or to go from 30?
That was one of the biggest questions that we had, and we found that adding an additional tank to support it, we didn't have that problem. That was the initial concern that both manufacturers recommended to us, and we now operate both vehicles with 40 GGEs and hadn't had a problem with being able to get the capacity. Actually, they're telling us we can possibly get additional capacity now when we met with them recently, because technology is improving that much. So some of the statistics that I wanted to share with you is, I know most of you probably not in the transit industry, but we can do it in transit, and we're hauling people, and we have a lot heavier load than most people would most likely have. This shows you from the American Public Transit Association in 2017 where transit set across the country. So you had 16.9% of fleets across the country using hybrid electric. You got 16.7% using compressed natural gas, 8.9% using liquefied natural gas. Biodiesel is 7.4%, 6.2% is battery electric, and propane is about 0.3%. With that being said, you're talking close to 57% of American public transit fleets run on alternative fuels at this point. If we can do it, I promise you, there's options for everyone to be able to do it. So that just gives you a picture that more than half of your public transit systems across the world are using alternative fuels at this point. So speaking of Sportran and some of the things that we did, I told you the things that we got. We got a lot of federal funding and things that are happening in the system. Only is made possible by you who are supporting our tax dollars and able to push us forward. One of the things that I said a week or so ago, it has been
That 57%, was that the world you said? Or
that's the American Public Transit Association.
It's not the world, it's just the United States.
It's just the United States.
Okay.
I'm sorry if I said world. I'm sorry.
Okay.
It's the American Public Transit Association. It's in the U.S. market. I'm sorry. One of the things that I like to reference is to show you, by switching to alternative fuels, we've been able to successfully get grant dollars. So in the federal market now, there's a lot of dollars that are available for alternative fuels. The Department of Energy offer grants. The U.S. Department of Transportation offer grants. You had to actually get out there and look for the grants. So in 2016, we were able to purchase 5 CNG New Flyer buses. And when I say a New Flyer bus only runs about $500,000 a piece. And we were able to do 11 cutaways, which normally runs us about $150,000 a piece. In 2017, we received grant funding to do additional 4 cutaway buses, 8 CNG buses, which is another $500,000 a piece, and then we introduced the battery electric buses, which is around $817,000 a piece. And the reason I'm sharing the numbers with you is because I want you to realize it's major money it's major money from the federal government they're offering for alternative fuel vehicles. And recently we have obtained enough funding that we have on order right now. We have 17 new Flyer CNG buses coming into property. Hopefully by December of this year, or if not January of next year. We have 12 Ford Transit vans. So that's something new that we looked at. We looked at a concept of how do we not only have the cutaway style buses, but the new Ford Transit that come out that's more of a smaller vehicle. We can get it in and out different locations better. We received funding to do 12 of those. And to get those vehicles in CNG, we're only looking at $65,000 versus $150,000. So there are alternatives out there at this point. And then we also been successful recently in obtaining funding to get 2 additional all-electric buses, which are also going to be pro tariffs as well. So let's hop right into some of the data that we see. So in Shreveport right now, the way our data breaks out is For us to operate diesel, we get about 4 miles per gallon. On CNG, we get about 4 miles per gallon. We do see about 48 cents per mile to operate a diesel bus. Is about 38% a mile to operate CNG. Right now, Proterra's battery electric, based on the technology and the way our system is set up to feed the buses at nighttime, the nighttime charger, we're seeing about 10 cents per mile. That's about 19.8%. So battery electric has been successful. We're in our 11th month, and this is an estimate for a year. But at this point in time, that's where we're analyzing that we should end at the end of this year. So battery electric has definitely been good for us. So overall, the federal government requires us to keep a bus for a lifetime. Lifetime for them is 12 years. So 12 years, we're estimating in diesel, we're gonna spend $1.8 billion in fuel on a diesel bus. In CNG, we're gonna spend $1.4 million. And with those totals we just talked about, if they hold true, we should spend about $400,000 in battery electric. So that kind of washes out what we just talked about. We spent $817,000 purchasing a battery electric bus. We should recoup, if the numbers stay true and the life of the bus lasts at the same condition it's lasting now, we should recoup the amount that we spent in the capital investment in fuel savings as we go forward with battery electric. So this is going to be an interesting screen. I know it's probably not one of the people who are supportive of CNG that you wanted me to post, but I believe we're putting the real numbers up. So diesels right now for our maintenance costs per mile, we're looking at about 90 cents. And CNG, we're looking at about $1.31 per mile, and our battery electric is about 65 cents per mile at this point. Of course, that's because it doesn't have the engine in the back of it. Our biggest cost that we see in CNG at this point, which has got a lot better on our latest round, but we had to look at our data since we've been operating CNG since 2010. We had a lot of failures in CNG engines right early on with our 2010 and 2011 models. I can say that now we've got some 2015 models that we're running around 400,000 miles on now, and they're still kicking. But the first round of CNG that we only got 250,000 miles out of those engines. Where our diesel, I'm coming to you, sir. Where our diesel engines, we used to get about 500,000 miles. So that's the reason that you see the maintenance costs being so much higher on CNG. The one positive thing about CNG that actually balances out that we use it as, and I don't believe in putting those numbers in because those are not true lifetime numbers, is we get a tax incentive each year for CNG, and the tax credit we receive for CNG each year actually reduces this cost and make it more efficient to operate than actually operating diesel bus. Yes, sir.
My question was, did you do the number on the RINs and the tax credits to make the comparison more fair?
Yeah, that's definitely it, but my thing is at this point in time, the way I have to look at numbers, and me sitting at my desk at this point, I believe in putting out the numbers the way they are. This year, the tax credit is not there yet. The federal government, we're working with the federal government, and we're advocating to get that tax credit there, but this year, the tax credit is not there. So this year, if I don't get the tax credit, when I close my books out, this is my number. So, I mean, that's where my fair comparison comes in.
You mean the RIN as well as the tax?
Correct.
Question.
Uh-huh.
Your failures on your engines early on,
Uh-huh.
do you know why? Was it duty cycle situations? Were there recalls?
Cummins could never provide that information to us. I can tell you that Cummins came out with a better CNG engines maybe 2 or 3 years ago, and that engine we started using in our bus 2 or 3 years ago was a lot more productive for CNG than, because like I said, I have 2015, so I'm running 400,000 miles on it. And knock on wood, I hadn't got an email yet saying one broke down yet today. But so I got 8 out there that's running close to between 300 and 400,000 miles.
We have the first one to K-Word, K-80. They're gonna remove our engine at 50,000 miles to look at the whole thing, replace the engine, brand new.
Gotcha. It's wonderful. So lifetime fuel costs is the same thing. Well, the ultimate goal for CNG, the lifetime maintenance costs, as you see, are posted above. If you add tax credits in, that number's a lot lower, but at this point in time, we won't have tax credits unless the federal government comes in and do something a little bit different.
What's the maintenance you do on diesel?
I'm sorry?
What maintenance do you do on the EV?
We have very limited maintenance on the EV at this point in time. We do have a lot of fluids that we change out on that vehicle. We do have a battery system that should be replaced at 6 years. At this point in time, we have a cost already associated with replacing that battery system at 6 years. Because as you go through the life cycle of batteries, and being fair and across the board, battery technology, the more you use the batteries, the weaker batteries get, just like the battery in your car. So it comes to a point where your range is going to decrease due to the fact of the batteries going out. So the ultimate goal, if you analyze the way we're budgeting it, is we're budgeting maintenance costs each year for the next 6 years in order to equate for what's going to happen in 6 years when we replace that battery back.
I mean, I just thought y'all would need a certain amount of range.
We do. I mean, at this point,
Battery life is 6 years. So
at this point in time, I can put a battery electric bus on the road and we can run over 300 miles easily. It's part of what route we put it on. One of the things that the U.S. federal government also did was they actually sent some consultants out to look at the route analyzation, where we put routes at. Where we put routes at based on the based on the climb, the hills, the condition, the weather, and that's how we had made the adjustments in going forward. Okay.
No, my point being, if you're looking at 300-mile range and the battery life is 6 years, it's really 2 or 3 years for you. That you don't have to replace it.
No, actually, the way they're looking is 6 years ultimately. We will be able to handle the battery life of the bus because each one of our routes at this point in time, I don't have a route that operates more than 214 miles a day. So at this point in time, I'm still have additional 30 to 40% on the dash every day when that bus comes in. So my range will fall down, but I should never fall below that 214 before 6 years at this point, the way it's analyzed. That's something we looked at very closely. And the other thing that I will tell you is that the 2 additional electric buses that we talked about we are getting has an additional range of about 175 miles already, which is battery technology. So we'll see something different. We're going to go ahead and get ready to wrap our presentation up. That is my information. If you ever have any questions, reach out to us. And we're proponents of CNG. I know some of the statistics for CNG doesn't look the brightest, but what I'm telling you is it's based on, I would be buying 17 new CNG buses if I didn't think the tax credits would be there and the benefits for operating CNG buses are there. The ultimate goal is we look at the emission, even though we realize clean diesel is coming close to CNG now. But at the end of the day, the tax credits and the things that the federal government is going to offer and all the markets, at least in the transit industry, the way they're pushing is supporting us staying in the alternative fuel market. I would like to invite you, if you're out in the Shreveport market, we have a lot of exciting things happening in the transit system. You have my information, reach out, contact us. Last year we built 3 new transit terminals and changed all our system around. So if you want to come see some positive things, the things that's happening in the right direction in public transit, we don't get to talk about that a lot in our state. Feel free to come to Shreveport and we'll show you. And if you're in Baton Rouge is doing some exciting things here as well. And they're introducing their first battery electric buses in December. Is there any other questions? Yes, sir.
You need an assistant?
We really appreciate you all. Thank you.
Thank you.